All right, Barbara, it looks like it's 12 o'clock on my watch here. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Welcome, everyone. We are really excited to be here with you this afternoon. We'll be talking about the IEP project, and if you can put kind of in the chat here for us, your name, what your role is, where your location is, so we can kind of get a sense of who our audience is in this virtual world. That's nice at least to have that connection. My name is Megan Gross. I am the Inclusive Practices Teacher on Special Assignment here in Poway, Unified, California. My specialty area is special education. This is my 15th year as a special education teacher here in California. And my passion is inclusion and finding ways for students of all ability levels to engage in the general education curriculum and communities. And I had the great opportunity to meet my co-presenter today as the 2017 California Teacher of the Year. And so it's a gift that keeps on giving to get to present with the fabulous Barbara.
Oh, and thank you so much, Megan. And it really was meeting you and others through the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. Amazing, amazing people. I'm Barbara Pape. I'm the Senior Director of the Learner Variability Project at Digital Promise. I also, very long ago, was a teacher in special education and did academic work, and particularly in reading and literacy. And I have children who have dyslexia and went through the IEP process, so which was interesting and was really inspirational in designing the IEP project. I do want to say one thing. We just had an earthquake here. I am an East Coast born and raised, but moved out to the West Coast. So in case I leave, just know that. And Megan is going to take over and do everything, which she can obviously do with aplomb, right? So, oops, now how it is not moving. For some reason, I'm not able to move the slides. So now, oh, there we go. So today we're talking about creating strength-based IEPs using the science of learning and development in order to help support a mindset shift among educators and other adults and to support the whole child. The IEP project, so just a little note on that. We started the, hang on one second here. We started the IEP project as a partnership with Brooklyn Labs Charter School, the Educating All Learners Alliance, and also a team of expert teachers who included Megan. And as you can see here, the goal is really to elevate a strengths-based approach to developing these IEPs. The visual that our design team put together just says it all. The IEP process I went through with my son was more like the typical IEP process. It's you and the student and the team of experts. And I don't care what your master's is in, or it's an intimidating experience, right? What we would like to do is have this IEP project and the teacher template help move us to an IEP process that puts the parent, caregiver, and child in the center with a team of experts surrounding them and having a feedback loop. So there's a conversation going on. Let me see if I can move it this way. What we want to do right now is just do a short waterfall here. When I say go, what do you think of when you hear strengths-based IEP? So if you can just put that in the chat. Anybody? Focus on scholar ability rather than deficits, academic and social strengths, framing. Yeah. Sometimes, oh, keep going. Yeah, specific strengths. You know, some people sometimes think these are absolutely great. Sometimes people think, and like, oh, Anthony, you're such a nice person. You love to have a conversation. It's unfortunate that you have dyslexia, and that's not what we mean by strengths-based. And I want to pass this over to Megan now, who is going to talk a little bit more about the need for strengths-based IEPs.
So this is such a critical thing that we do in education, is really helping our students think about who they are as learners, and how to utilize their strengths to leverage skill building. And I'm a parent, and I have a child with an IEP. And on the drive to school this morning, we were going through our day, and when I explained what I was doing today here with all of you, I said, you know, what do you think that is? Like, what do you think a strengths-based IEP is? And he said, you mean they're not all strengths-based? Like, how else would I learn something? And he's a 7th grader, right? So he has a little bit of a kind of some smart responses sometimes. But just really thinking about, right, as a 7th grader, I said, so where do you see your teachers utilizing your strengths? And he said, nowhere. I don't use my strengths at all during the school day, which like broke my teacher heart and my mama heart in half on the drive this morning. And so then like we started talking about, like, we have to also explicitly make connections for our students, right? Like when we're leveraging strengths to help our students develop those metacognitive skills of like, this is how I learn. And I'm going to need to get some visual supports, right? I'm going to need to make myself an outline. And so a strengths-based IEP reminds the team to do this work, right? And is really thinking about, you know, I had a student one year who was had autism and was non-speaking, and it was really difficult for some of us to determine what was his skill level ability. And so we got pictures and videos that had step-by-step directions. And all of a sudden he could do so much. And what teams of people had assumed between elementary school and middle school was that he was just a nice kid, as Barbara was saying, right? Like he was just sweet. But he had a lot of skills, and he could build beautiful clay sculptures. He could draw. He could follow a sequence of pictures to create multi-step projects and assignments. And so it's really shifting the lens of the IEP team's focus to figure out, okay, if this is a student that needs this visual support, how do we utilize that to then build future skills? It doesn't ignore the fact that we have to build skills, right? But it does so in a way that's positive. And that really is more growth attaining when you're working on something that you care about and that supports you. And importantly, it also really promotes our student self-advocacy and self-determination. We know this is a critical skill for long-term outcomes for our youth with disabilities. We'll switch to the next slide there.
Oops.
So one of the things that we also really want to make sure that we're doing strengths-based IEPs, because we know from research that still almost a third of teachers attribute sometimes learning challenges to laziness, that kids just aren't paying attention. And this is a real thing, right? That a third of our teachers with kids who have documented disabilities dismiss them. Our parents feel that stigma, and our kids feel that stigma of having that label. And so 43% don't want people to know as parents that their child has a disability. And then 54% of parents, right, may or may not follow doctor recommendations for attention issues. So we've created such a stigmatized system of support that even when someone finally does qualify for support, we don't access it because it's not seen as a positive, it's seen as a negative. So I want us to think now as adults, what happens for you at work or at home in the community when someone knows you and values your strengths and considers them? So I'm going to give you a few seconds here to reflect, and then we'll do another like waterfall chat here of the impact that has on you. So get those typing fingers ready. What happens when someone knows your strengths and considers them? All right, waterfall chat, here we go. I'm asked to participate in projects. feel seen, valued and supported, participate, gives me confidence. We're more willing to try new things. Our sense of belonging increases. We're inspired. Our voice is elevated. How often do our students feel like their voice is elevated and that they have some choice? These are great. Oh, Kim, I love this one, right? Not being afraid to share my ideas. Yeah. When you belong, when you feel valued, right? You can take some risks, right? If you don't think you might have a popular idea, right? Aspire higher. So we wanted to share here of a student sharing what happens when you value voice, when you value strengths and interests. And so we have a student here who Benjamin is going to share with us. He has a special interest in cars and like incredible amount of knowledge about the cars. If we were not thinking strengths-based, right, we would just be like, no, don't write about cars anymore, right? Don't talk about cars. This is what we're doing. And his team took a different approach, right? Like they really thought about his knowledge of cars and the skills that he needed to develop. And so concepts like comparing and contrasting were really challenging for him. And so Benjamin's gonna share how he learned to kind of compare and contrast by leveraging his knowledge of cars.
A lot about cars, and my IEP team, they knew that. And my speech therapist, throughout the year when we were working and out of when we were working, I created a document comparing and contrasting a bunch of these different cars in the segment of vehicle that she needed. And it was really helpful that the IEP team knew that I knew about this, because she was happy that I did it. She ended up getting a brand new car because of this.
That's my favorite part, the ending.
A lot about cars. And my IEP team.
Yeah, he every time I see that, I mean, he sums up what is strength-based education and IEPs better than anyone I have heard to date. And we just absolutely love playing that. But we also want to talk about the need for a lens of educational equity to create strength-based IEPs, because there are more strength-based and whole child IEPs are not enough. We also need to be culturally responsive in order to understand and address the needs of each student in a whole child way. Celebrating diversity is great, but what we need to do is a lot more than that, is actually address unique needs. And so at the Learner Variability Project, where I am, another team of teachers came together to create this guidebook. And it's a reflective tool centered on not just celebrating, but addressing cultural diversity. The report was based on a policy study from New America, which is another nonprofit. And that report was called Culturally Responsive Teaching, a 50-state survey of teaching standards. One of the commonalities with our IEP project is they ask questions. There's a slew of reflective questions throughout this report. How can I identify strengths for each of my students and create opportunities to communicate those strengths to them? The other aspect of this, and the link is here, so please use it, is a series of protocols to guide educators through being more culturally responsive. And we see that as being in concert with strength-based IEPs. As a matter of fact, as soon as I'm done here, I have another webinar, and the topic there is the intersectionality of race and learning disabilities. We also want to talk a little bit about the learner variability connection to all of this. And first of all, though, what is learner variability? So learner variability is based on Todd Rose's book, The End of Average. So many people have read that. It's a great book. If you haven't, it's a quick, easy read. He's a great writer. And it guides us on how we can work to reach the full diversity of learners in every classroom. So here's the definition. It's the recognition that every student has a unique set of strengths and challenges across a whole child framework that are interconnected and vary according to context. We see that it opens doors to being culturally responsive and also to create strengths-based inclusive education and learning for each student. So there's a tie-in with the IEP project that we're going to be showing you very soon. Excuse me. One of the lines from the paper, I wrote this paper mentored by Todd Rose on it. When you understand learner variability, you see a design challenge, not a student problem. And that's what we're trying to get at, is how do you design learning instruction, classrooms, learning environments to meet the needs of the full diversity of learners. So our learner variability Navigator is a free and open source web app. This is the whole child framework. You can see here, there's content, cognition, that's things like attention and working memory, a series of social and emotional learning skills and student background. I'm going to take you in for a brief section, a brief minute actually, just to see, let's see if this works now, and it does, good. This is the home page of the Learner Variability Navigator. And we have created, with a team of researchers, including our own researchers, I think maybe Allison might have been listening in here. We create learner models for grades pre-K through 12 in math and literacy, and we have an adult learner model. I'm going to open up literacy 4 to 6, which is the grades that I taught. And you can see here, this is a whole child framework. And I'll show you very, very, very briefly how it can work. You have literacy, there's your content areas if you're teaching grades 4 through 6 in literacy. Cognition, attention, auditory processing, working memory, social and emotional learning, sense of belonging. I was so happy to see that crop up in the chat because that's one of our latest factors to consider. And also student background, everything from are you living in adverse experiences? What about your health, from hearing to safety to sleep? And now that I brought up sleep, I want to show you what is so unique about this web app. If you hover over working memory, so let's say you are observing that a student in your class is struggling with working memory, you can see connections with other factors of learning. So is it phonological processing or orthographic processing? That's in the literacy, the content area. And that would indicate a possibility of a learning disability, maybe like dyslexia. But you also see that sleep is connected. And just because you've created that sense of belonging and you've built relationships with your students, you know that this particular student has a wonderful single parent who works a night shift. When she comes home in the morning, it's this student's job to prepare their siblings for school. And who has kids, raise your hand, and who knows how exhausting that is in the morning? Yeah, mine are older now, they can do it themselves. But that it could, perhaps working memory is incredibly weak because they are just plain exhausted. And so that's understanding the why behind your students. And that's something else that we're trying to get at with our Learner Variability Navigator, but also as it relates to the IEP. So let me see how I get back into the, I think I have to give me 1 second to get back into our.
Barbara, before you go back into our slide deck, will you show folks how it aligns to strategies?
Oh, yes.
I think this is one of the most powerful things the Navigator does, and it's such a great tool for teachers.
I meant to do it. I'll tell you, I am a little distracted, but I feel a couple other shakes here. So
oh no!
That's why. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. One of the incredibly important things with our navigators, so we're going to click on working memory. And you probably saw me do this so many other times, Megan, right? And when you click on one of our factors of learning, you'll get a definition of it. You'll get main ideas. This is all based on research. You will also, once again, see the factors that connect to that. And if you scroll down, we have some other things where you can learn more. If you are writing a grant proposal or a dissertation, we include the citations for the research we use to build that particular learner model. So you can see that here. And hang on, I have to move things around a little bit to get to the, there we go. And then, as Megan thankfully pointed out, we have research-based strategies for this particular factor, which is working memory. And you can see, I'm just going to scroll, but I'll open up one. You can see what some of them are. Apologies for going a little bit quickly. And the one that I'm going to open is one on collaborative writing. So that is up here, here we go. And they all have a similar format when you open them up to make it easy to use. Excuse me. There's an overview of what is that strategy, right? And then there's an example of how can you use it in the classroom, and we found videos. So teachers can look at this on video to see how collaborative writing, they call it here peer review for writing instruction, can work in the classroom. Another part of our audience at the Learner Variability Project are EdTech developers. And so we put videos up and explain how can you incorporate collaborative writing in your EdTech product. And there are videos there as well. So that's the strategies of this of our Learner Variability Navigator. There are tools in the very beginning on how you can use it. We don't have time to go through all of them right now, but you can take a tour of the Navigator, choose a model, identify factors, get strategies, and you can certainly email me on any of this. Once again, we have creating a sense of belonging. These are different topics. We have supporting students with dyslexia, and we have guided tools as well. There's a plethora of amazing research-based material in here. But I do want to get us back to, so I think I just stopped sharing. Let's see what happens.
I had a chance to share the Learner Variability Navigator project with elementary school teachers a couple of weeks ago, and it was such a brilliant tool, right? Because we all see as teachers where our students are struggling and have challenges. And so to be able to go, oh, I know this student isn't sleeping well, right? Like the parents have shared that like there's stuff going on at home. They're not on their normal routine. Like here are some strategies I can actually do in my classroom today, instead of kind of the commiserating that tends to happen in staff lounges or in hallways, right? That, oh, I know it's been a hard day. And so I just think it's so powerful to have those research-based strategies, whether you're in the classroom like some of our audience members are, or if you're advocating at the district or state level, to be able to share those tools. They do often we feel like we don't know how to do something, and the strategies are there. We just have to know where to look and where to click.
So let me go back into slideshow there. And Megan actually on our website as well has put together, we have workspaces, and she's put together a few using our strategies on dyslexia, ADHD, and autism. So please feel free to explore that. And now Megan is going to now take us through the teacher template that notes LVN factors of learning and includes our strategies to bring about strength-based IEPs. The template that Megan helped create can be used in any school at any level as a support for general education, special education, resource teachers, and other educators. And first, I think she's going to take us through some of the why IEPs can be used as a lever for change.
Barbara, can you share your screen for us?
Oh, I thought it was shared. No?
No.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I am going through it as if it was being shared. Hold on. Let's see if I can get that back up there. For some reason now, there we go. Okay, hold on one second. So I am going to put us up here. Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
All right.
So we wanted to really think about why would we do this? Because, right, everyone's plates are overflowing in our schools, and certainly if you're a special education teacher, right, like having one more thing to do around an IEP probably like gives you some heart palpitations. But we really started to look at kind of the system-wise, like it's the only legal document in our public education system that's really tailored to individualized intervention and supports. It legally requires, right, that parent input, that collaboration between all disciplines in a school system. And as students get older, right, it includes their participation. Like that's mandated by, you know, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so the hope is, right, that if we improve our IEPs, we're going to be able to improve outcomes for students, right? We're going to be able to align across our instruction and our intervention supports to be able to really address our students' social emotional well-being, to address the needs that they have in transition, right? And I think often, like when we're doing a strengths-based IEP, when you're doing that with primary age students, that helps you build that map towards what does life after high school look like. And building that map so much earlier really also helps improve those outcomes for our students. Barbara, can you go to the next slide for me? So we have an opportunity here as educators to be a part of this project. It was developed by Brooklyn Labs Charter Schools and Digital Promise in partnership. And we had teachers across the country who were a part of this project, which I really loved because I think sometimes we get really, we forget that this is a federal law and we can get really kind of bogged down into some of our kind of state specific requirements. And so we had a chance to learn from each other about what would make this process better and what would a strengths-based IEP look like. And so we really started with thinking about the whole child and some of the research that Barbara just shared with you. And thinking about adjustments we make with our language, right? That we're still honoring that our students have challenges. We're not sugarcoating anything, but we're looking for strengths. And then being able to include and really integrate evidence-based resources from the Learner Variability Navigator is critical for this being really meaningful and powerful for our students. So as I said before, right, if we add one more thing to a special education teacher's plate, they just might throw it on the floor. So we are mindful of this, right? So when you open up the IEP project template, right, there are different audiences for different pieces of this work, I think. And so at the nuts and bolts of it, if we can start as educators asking these reflective questions and really starting to change our mindsets about how we think about how we serve our students with disabilities. And so those of us who have drafted IEPs with teams and families, right, like having the right information is critical. And so really starting that first conversation, not, you know, you have all your data and you have your assessment results, but who's the student? And what do they enjoy doing? What do they do well? How do we start thinking in our heads as educators? How do I take this love of Minecraft, right? How do I take this interest in art and fashion? And how do I help that support the opportunities to grow in areas of challenge? And then also making sure that we're including the students in that process. You know, the conversation that I had this morning with my 7th grader was such a great reminder of, like, he comes to his IEP meetings, but is he understanding the bigger picture, right? And is he able to advocate and share, this is what I care about? And this is how I prefer to learn. And then what do we want our teachers to know about ourselves? What do we want the specialists to know about who we are, and how to best meet our needs? I was supporting an elementary school student before this presentation, and she's very soft-spoken. And I said, what is it we need to know? Like, how could we hear your voice in class? And she said, you just need to know I'm shy and I'm not going to speak in front of others. Right? And she was like, I don't need to talk louder because I'm not interested. And so we got her a microphone, but also just being mindful of like what's whole group versus small group. And then really starting to think about how do we incorporate student interests and hobbies into coursework, right? And so going back to the example of Benjamin, right? He's working with his speech therapist on compare and contrast, right? He's bringing in that love of automobiles. I had a teacher that I was working with, social studies, who was, it was ancient history. And the student kept going, when she was doing her lesson, the student kept going onto Minecraft in his browser. And she was getting really frustrated and was like, oh my gosh. And so one of her colleagues said, how about the next time, instead of like getting really frustrated, right? And about like this behavior, why don't you just go over and say, okay, like let's apply this. So she went over to him and said, well, so we're working on ancient China. These are the different options for a project. Would you like to build the Great Wall of China in Minecraft? And these are the rules. Like here you have to follow it historically, right? That he was engaged. He knew the content because he could do it in a format of his choosing, and something that he cared about. That was like a great aha moment for this teacher, and for this student. And then just really thinking about how do we support how students see themselves. This is really challenging for our students with disabilities, right? I think that they have developed for so long such a negative self perspective. They're identifying their strengths is a challenge. So really thinking about helping coach them in many regards as to, I see that drawing is a strength for you, right? I see collaborating on a Google Doc, using comments where you're not having to actually speak, like you're really good at that. Like you seem really comfortable in that format. So really putting, our students need those coaching stems, just like I think we do as adults, right? Like how great is it when we walk around the office and somebody says, oh my gosh, that project you did, that was phenomenal. I took it to the superintendent, right? You're like, oh, so really thinking about how we're supporting that student voice. And then we really want to make sure that we're not just measuring deficits to build our IEPs, right? We do our data collection for IEP goals. We're looking at triangulating our data, right, of all of our different assessment results. But are we also looking for the strengths, right? When I'm doing a reading fluency assessment for a student, am I also thinking about the strength? It used to take me forever to do my triennial assessments using the Wyatt or the Woodcock-Johnson, because I was always taking notes on the side of how the student was processing the information, right? Were they drawing a picture? Were they using any of their, were they counting on their fingers? Like all of those things, so that we could figure out, how do we take this snapshot of a moment of an assessment result and actually make that meaningful for the team, instead of just saying like, well, below average, moving on, right? So really building that in.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize too what Megan is saying, and seeing it firsthand, with my son going through school, and he was lucky. One is learning how to self-advocate is so important. He lucked out because that was my degree, was in reading and literacy. And I used to work with kids who have dyslexia. So it was like, okay, no big deal. And not all parents, but the most important thing to remember is that not all parents are coming to the table with, that degree in their back pocket. And so it's upon us as educators, as adults who are involved in the learning of that goes on, the teaching and learning, to to help them advocate for themselves and be able to speak up and, you know, to have the confidence. I love that, Megan, for that young girl to say, you know, hey, don't bother me. I'm shy. That's why I don't speak up. Well, that, you know, you don't worry about her.
Right.
She knows herself. And that's the kind of spirit that we created this IEP project, where you're not looking just at deficits, you're giving students the freedom and the understanding, and you're addressing their needs so that they can speak up for themselves. And I'm going to go to the next slide. And here, did you want to click through that, Megan, and go through?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
click through
Oh,
the
you
tool.
want me to? All right, here, I'll
Sorry,
do it. No, that's okay. Just tell me where to go.
Okay. So what I want to highlight a few different things in this report. So I'm really excited as somebody who participated in this project during COVID, is that it's had a refresh. And so, I mean, I think that really just speaks to the work Digital Promise is doing, but also really that, right, IEPs aren't this stagnant document. And so it has recently gone through a refresh to be more culturally responsive and to really look at it through an equity lens. And so what we have here are kind of high level overview that we've kind of presented already in our presentation that you'll see in the introduction. So maybe if we could kind of skim through that part, Barbara.
You just tell me when to stop.
Okay. So, right. So this is all of the higher level things around learner variability, whole child project, that really gives kind of the background for the why. So that way, if this tool was given to somebody else who hasn't seen this presentation, right, we have the information there as a resource guide.
Want me to keep
yeah. And so these are our questions again. So that way we really thought about, you know, some of us, myself included, like are writing IEPs at 9 o'clock at night at the kitchen table. And so it's too late for me to have a graphic organizer with information. So I can start with the reflective questions we just talked about, right? I can have empathy for my student and really put them at the center of my thinking about what our recommendations should be as a team.
If I can't, Megan, I'm going to give a shout out to Amanda Morin. She is also on the board of the Learner Variability Project. And we're going to add a link in here. This did go through a refresh. It's not 100% done, like 99% done. She did a webinar for us on the importance of empathy in creating IEPs. And it's such an important point. And as Megan was saying, if teachers, you know, we're giving them a lot to do. If they can simply take a deep breath and start with these reflective questions, they've made giant strides as they write these IEPs in their busy, busy, busy lives. Go ahead, Megan.
That's such an important point. And just thinking about our empathy as well for our families. You know, Barbara shares, right, that this is her area of expertise in terms of literacy. And as a parent going through the IEP process, I'm a special education teacher, right? Like I know this process. My husband's a PhD. And the first time we did the process, he went, sure. Okay. Signed where he was asked to sign. And we walked out of the school and I said, okay, well, what did you think? And he said, what did we just agree to? I have no idea. Like all of that made no sense to me. And I thought, okay, well, this is where our son's self-advocacy challenges come from. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree here, but also it meant that like someone who like has an education, has resources, doesn't understand what we're talking about. And so really having empathy for our families, like what does this document mean to them? Right? Like why are these services beneficial? Why are they important? Why are these goals something that we should care about? So I wanted to put that plug in too of the empathy for the families going through this process. So let's scroll down. So we have examples here of just even what do strengths start with? Right? And what are those in terms of social emotional learning? What are those in terms of cognitive strengths, academic strengths? How do we have some kind of models for writing those?
Oh, if I add one more thing, sorry, Megan.
Yes, no.
But the other thing is, it's so important here to realize that a strength doesn't have to only fall in two categories, cognitive and content. A strength can also be SEL. And here's an example, and I'll use my son. Boy, Anthony just loves conversation. He still does. And you know, loves to talk and this and that. He had dyslexia. And so the teacher way back in 4th grade said, I'm going to put his book on recording. We called it on tape back then, and form a book club. And by the way, that is one of our strategies in the Navigator. Form a book club. He can read it his way. Everyone can read it, you know, in by text, and then we'll put him in the book club so he can have a conversation. That's strength-based. That's using, you know, his ability to have a conversation, to be socially aware and build relationships. That's in the SEL category, right? So it's so important to remember that strengths can be found in their social emotional skills and also in their background. Cultural diversity, if the wonderful, or as Juliana Ortube, who was last year's National Teacher of the Year, you know, says that the giftedness of language, right, of multilingual learners, you know, that's a strength that people can bring to the table as well, pairing it up with what some challenge may or may be. All right, I'm back with you.
That's such an important reminder. I think often for our students with learning disabilities, that section, I feel like gets left to the side, the social emotional learning section, right? We're so focused on like, let's catch them up in their reading and their writing and their math that we forget to bring that piece in. So I appreciate that reminder, Barbara. So I want to scroll down here now to our, yes, this template here. So one of the things that we talked about as educators is that our students are accessing multiple classrooms sometimes, depending on their age level. And one of the things that many special education teachers struggle with is the ability to get information from general education colleagues. You know, our colleagues are also have plates that are overflowing. And so sometimes the feedback we get is, oh, they're doing fine, it's great. And that's not enough to build an IEP, right? And so we really worked as a team to really think about what is it we actually want to hear from our teachers when we ask for an update on student progress and as for a student's IEP. And so it was really important to us that we didn't just have, you know, please tell us about academic experiences, semicolon. So you'll see in all of our graphic organizers here, so just like with the summary for the student background information, it gives examples, right? Consider adverse experiences. For our assessment information, are there assessments where a student is more successful? What supports them in demonstrating their knowledge? Where are the growth areas that you see for them in your content area? What accommodations? I think this piece is really important. And I like to remind general education teachers, right, we need your input. If we're meeting as a team and we don't have the math content area expert with us, right, we might make recommendations for accommodations that the teacher doesn't actually see the student needing in order to access the material and the information. And so this is where we need that input, right? What accommodations does the student need? What do they not need? Are you doing something else that we haven't documented, right? Because this document lives and it travels to different teachers. And then here we have a section for student input. So we've drafted questions here. You know, what do you think about your academic strengths? You know, your teachers think that you would really benefit from an organizational system. Do you agree? Right? Some of our students, right, are very capable of saying, oh yeah, I totally do, right? That would be my son. Or no, I can do it. I just haven't been, right? Like, and so really having those conversations helps them own those accommodations too, so that they know this is what supports me in accessing this. And so then we looked at here, we also wanted to know about social emotional learning and behavior. And so being able, if there's any data, if we're in a school system that kind of has data on this, but also really thinking about their needs in this area, and providing support and building skills before our students are in crisis, right? We know our students are struggling right now. We, I think, skip really over low level behaviors, right? Because we're all overwhelmed. The student I was helping today, Barbara, who said, I'm just not going to talk. Yeah. Because she doesn't talk, when she doesn't do work, no one bothers her because she doesn't talk, right? She's not poking the person next to her. She's not throwing a chair because she's not going to do the work and the work is too hard. She's just going to sit here. And myself, I've been observing and I thought, oh, okay, well, she's quiet. And the other teacher said, she's avoiding work, Megan. And I said, oh my gosh, right? Like we don't see some of these things sometimes. And so I really appreciate the call out boxes there to help us remind ourselves. And then just information about what information would we need to kind of plan this goal. So this is where we could pull some baseline information to write goals that are meaningful for our students. And then maybe we can come down here a little bit to look at the strategies. I actually wanted to go down a little bit further. So, but this part is important, sorry. So if we wanted to, right, we could make this into a Google form for teachers. It has the teacher signature there, like that's their input providing. So if you wanted to photocopy that and put that into teachers' boxes, that's how we kind of thought about that tool. So that way we have that information in a student's file. Okay, now we can keep going. So our appendix here, we wanted to model what we were thinking about as we were going through this process, and what a response would look like. Right. And because oftentimes when I'm sharing with folks, oh, we're going to talk about strengths-based IEPs. And I get a response of, well, how is that any different? Right? How is it any different from what we're already doing? And so we have examples here to really kind of highlight, you know, if you look at this first one here, the example of academics and cognition, here, Antonio has a struggle, right? He has a challenge with fluency and accuracy. And then when is he able to comprehend above grade level, right? And then also leveraging his home language of Spanish. And then there's a connection there of like what's successful for him. So having time to read stories for pleasure, being able to use text to speech. And so we have kind of these sample statements as models. So that way we can provide that for our educators so that they're not just like our students, right? Our students want writing models as well. So maybe we can go down to part 2. And then we also wanted to link in strategies. And so these go back to the Learner Variability Navigator. So that way, as teams are building this strengths-based IEP, we have resources right away for how can we start leveraging these strengths? How can we build them into IEP goals, into supports and services? And so those strategies are also linked in for us. And I love that it's all right there, right? Yep. Organization, communication, motivation. And then as Barbara was saying earlier, right, if you wanted to write a grant around this or do further reading, there are some phenomenal books there. I love that first one, Inclusive Education in a Strengths-Based Era. Dr. Jennifer Kurth was my mentor teacher when I was student teaching. So I love that that one's at the top of the list. And I didn't put it there.
Yeah, we're adding to all of this as well. As I said, we're like 99% done, have to put in a couple more links and a couple more. But, you know, one thing I do want to say, if any of you have ideas for books or research papers you think belong in here, maybe you've done them or they're from your, you know, from your organization, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll review and if we can, we'll put them in. Do you want me to open up one of your workspaces, Megan?
Sure.
Okay, which one?
Let's go ahead and do dyslexia.
Okay. So Megan, now teachers in school or any resource teachers, anybody can create these workspaces and share them with each other. But we have created some workspaces so people can get an idea of what these look like. So this is Megan's workspace. She did, I'm not going to play it right now, but she did an amazing video where she talks about why she's included certain strategies. So here we explain a little bit, this is on dyslexia, of what's going on there. And she pulled out certain strategies that she felt were incredibly useful that she has used. And in her video, and organized them by, emotion, social support, stereotype, threat, that's SEL, decoding, orthographic, phonological, and morphological processing, memory and fluency, numeracy and math communication. And these are, you can find these on our website at the Learner Variability Project. There's a series of, we call them signature workspaces, and they are incredibly useful, and teachers can create them on their own and share in their classrooms. Here's where I'm having trouble, which because I can't move our photos, our pictures here. Let's see if I can get that out of the way and get back to the slide presentation. Yeah, I think this is where we are now. Am I still sharing, correct?
Yes.
Did you want to go back into the tool, Megan? Is there anything else in there?
No, I don't think so. So I think we had a slide in there that maybe, did it jump about next steps?
Oh, yeah, it's gone. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But, we can ask the question. We gave this presentation last week at the League of Innovative Schools, which are superintendents of about 150 districts nationwide that are part of Digital Promise. And we did ask in there, so what are your next steps? And can people open up the mic, or can you just go and chat? Well, let's ask in chat, or if you want to open up your mic, feel free. What would be your next steps after seeing this conversation here on strength-based IEPs? Oh, I see. She doesn't. Okay. Yeah, I can share that with you, Natalie. Or Megan, do you think you could do that? That's with the tool. Can you open up the tool and send that to? They don't have access to it, is the problem.
Yes. Let me work on that.
I have I don't know if it's an idea, or one of the things that I think I'd like to see is how to help educators link the strengths-based IEPs to the grade level core content that we need to give students with disabilities access to, so that they could use their strengths to leverage those access points into the grade level standards.
Yeah. So you would, and so what would you want to see, like direct connections? Like, how do you do it?
Yeah, maybe some direct connections, or direct connections to some of those big rocks, the key concepts of the core, so that they could see how they, how they would align with that. And that could be an entry point or an access point into that grade level standard. Because so many times for students with disabilities, we see in their IEPs that they're at this grade level and they need to be at this grade level. So then we often see where the default is to go down to that lower grade level curriculum, rather than give them access with accommodations and supports to the grade level content. So I think if we could help link it to the grade level content and show them that these are actually entry points into the standard, it might be helpful.
That's a great idea. I mean, in general, and the theory is, of course, that's why we're doing this, is to keep expectations high, not to lower them. And I think, No Child Left Behind, one of the biggest reveals with that was how certain subgroups of students were not doing well at all, because we neglect them. I mean, with students of color, kids with students with learning disabilities, et cetera. But yeah, that's such an important point. Who are you? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm Kim Fratto. I'm from Utah. I'm the director of special ed programs in Utah.
Oh, great. Okay. That is such an important point. I might want to email you later on specific with that. If you don't,
I'm working on this. We're working on this in Utah, so I'd love to chat more.
Okay, my email's there, so please feel free to contact me if you're interested. And I'd love to have a further conversation, because it's such an important critical point is, how do you keep that's the goal behind this, but then what's the next step? How do you actually make sure that that happens? But I'll tell you, I really, having had a kid, my own child go through this, that most important thing is a mindset shift among people that, some of the things he heard, I had it on another slide and I don't always put it in because it's a little harsh, and he came out fine. Everything's great. He also was identified, and I really don't like any of the labels, but identified as gifted. So there's that twice exceptional student there. But he would hear things like, oh, it's a good thing you can draw because you sure won't be able to do anything academic. I mean, 780s across the board on the SAT. And I mean, it's just like there is that misunderstanding of who many of these students are. And you shouldn't have to be identified at a high level in order to have expectations meet where you can get to. Maybe not where you are right now because you don't have those accommodations, but giving those accommodations and not saying, we also heard things like, and we had wonderful experiences. So, I don't want to be a downer here, but, someone saying, so in an AP history class, so in high school, so why do you need it on Kurzweil? That was a text to speech when no one else does. And the junior in high school had explained, well, it's because no one else in the class has dyslexia. Maybe that's why. No one else is identified, and his friends, would help him read it, but finally that got taken care of. But you need to keep expectations high for all students wherever they can get to, so they can meet their potential. I would love to have that conversation with you.
Great. I'll send you an email.
Anyone else? Anybody else?
I see that Dennis has a comment here about collaborating with our district teams and kind of looking at where do we have this functionality within our IEPs, and where there might be gaps where we could utilize some tools to support.
Okay, I apologize. What is Calibrate? Is that a platform?
I think to align, looking at what we
calibrate. Oh, you mean to calibrate? Yeah. I thought it was like an ed tech product or something. Yeah. Oh boy. Okay, yeah, no, I know.
And Barbara, I tried to share the report, but I don't have permissions. I'm allowed to view, but I'm not allowed to share.
Boy, I am. Let me go on my other
It's a top secret document right now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Hold on. Any other questions? Megan, do you want to help out with any other questions?
Yeah, so I'd love to know kind of where folks see strengths-based learning, strengths-based IEPs, in practice. How are folks seeing that out in the field? Or where, when? Do we see it in the field at all?
Yeah, that's the bigger question, I think, sometimes. What's okay, if I can, let me interject this question.
Very limited.
Adding on to Megan's is, what's the barrier to making this happen? I'll mention something one teacher said, and not meaning to be snarky at all. She was just being real. Is she said that, why do I, and she was an excellent teacher and really cared. I mean, but she was like, so this is the problem. Why do I care about the why behind kids when the state doesn't? It's a compliance issue. And so, but there is language in IDEA on strength-based. Megan, I think you told me about that, and I've been rereading that legislation, or somebody did. And is that what's hard to do? Is that there isn't a push to do this? It could also be, we surveyed teachers at the Learner Variability Project on what informs your practice. Well, but also we surveyed the American public school teachers and parents on what do you need to actually bring learner variability to your classroom, after we defined it. And all three groups pretty much answered at a very high levels. Teachers need the time, the support, and the professional learning to make this happen. And clearly coming off of COVID, it is a really tough time. Hence, Megan and the team that she worked with created those essential questions to sit down and ask yourself, to just put you in that mindset.
I see here also some barriers about how we've traditionally done it, right? We have a kind of a, I think there's a lot of hope in what we learned from COVID. But I think so many of us, right, we're so relieved to like come back to our school buildings that we went back to everything we used to do instead of taking any of the tools that were successful for our students. And so I think that those traditions are hard for us to change and let go of. And so really thinking about how do you write present level statements that are strengths based, and maybe that's a team meeting, right, where we're just looking at language and examples. And I did this with a group of credential students. I actually put up a mock IEP and I said, tell me about this language and what do you see, not knowing this kid at all, just reading this present levels. And it was really eye-opening to me what the students called out, right, that they couldn't find some strengths in certain areas, like documented under social emotional learning. And it made them jump to conclusions. And so they were looking at an IEP for a student with a learning disability. And at the end they said, does this student have autism? Because that's how the present levels reads. And so it was really interesting to me thinking about how we write those.
Yeah, and I think this is, I think Lauren is the one who said, and it's coming out in some of your other ones too, you might see individual teachers working like this, but no, it's not school-wide, certainly not district-wide, certainly not a mandate from the state to do it, which you might not want anyway. But I think that's a really good point on how can we make this a school-wide process in order for all kids, to live up to the words that all kids, each student can meet their potential. And, the other thing that I mentioned briefly in here with the culturally responsive guidebook is that, if you are particularly a Black student, you often are misdiagnosed. Maybe your frustration with your learning disability is instead categorized as a behavior issue when it's not. It's just frustration from having a learning disability. I always say things that my son was able to do in terms of advocating for himself. Had he not been a white student from a relatively wealthy area, would he have been able to do that? Would he have gotten the support from the school that he did? And I think we all need to look in the mirror and ask those questions, because they are profound and they have a profound impact on some of our students. Anyway, did you have something else, Megan? I think.
Well, I think, Kim, thank you for that explanation, right? Like we were taught to go for, he tries hard, right? He's kind, social, and that was certainly a lens that I was taught with too. So we have to do some of that unlearning, and really thinking about our language that we use and how we talk about our students. And so I love the idea someone put in the chat of like, we all need this professional learning, right? General education and special education, and really kind of going back to the why and the purpose behind what we're doing, because we should all have time to talk to our students. And sometimes we just need permission, whether that's from a school building administrator, a district administrator, or the state administrator to say, oh my gosh, please talk to your students and find out who they are. Because we know that kids who feel like they belong do better. So if we really are concerned about those state test scores, right, like get to know your kids, because then they're going to perform. I mean, I've proctored those exams, and I remember proctoring once for a group of juniors. They weren't my students because the teacher who was normally in the room was out sick. And I said, like, how do you guys, like, we got to work hard on this and assessment. And they said, why? Who cares about this? I don't care about this. Like, I don't know you. And I said, but the teacher who like normally teaches your class. And he was like, oh, yeah, we really like him, but we hope he's not evaluated on these results. Like, because I would rather sleep for the next hour and a half than like put forth any effort in this. And I was like, oh gosh. But we gotta know our kids.
Yeah, and Megan brings up a good point too, because the research is coming out and very, very clear on those links between, you know, like belonging and eradicating stereotype threat in the classroom and develop, you know, learning how to develop relationships, et cetera, is so important for learning to occur. You can see on that LVN, if you click on one of them, what it all connects to. But I think the problem is it's stereotypically viewed as like soft, right? These are the soft skills. Meanwhile, the World Economic Forum, their top 3, these are CEOs from around the world. What do they look for in workers? And of course they want, you know, the 3 R's to be there, but really their top ones are things like collaboration, creative thinking. You know, it's hard to think creatively if you don't feel like you belong. And I forget who mentioned it in there. You know, if you don't feel free to share your thoughts and your thinking, you know, you want freedom to fail and the support to get back on track and figure out a new way to do what you're doing. Do you all have any questions for us you want to put in the chat? You want to, you know, go off mic. Our emails are here. Please do email us. You know, we're glad to go into detail on anything we talked about today. I can say, Megan, I know we're both so passionate about this issue, and I have a feeling you all are as well. So, you know, feel free to get in touch with us if you'd like.
You're welcome, Tammy. Thanks for your patience with the links.
All right, guys.
So I know that Natalie has a survey link to put into the chat. And so I want to make sure before people head out that we get that survey link put in the chat.